Among the singular customs of our forefathers, arising in a great measure from their indifference to decorum, one of the most remarkable was matrimony, solemnised, we were going to say, but the fittest word would be performed, by the parsons in the Fleet prison. These clerical functionaries were disreputable and dissolute men, mostly prisoners for debt, who, to the great injury of public morals, dared to insult the dignity of their holy profession by marrying in the precincts of the Fleet prison, at a minute's notice, any persons who might present themselves for that purpose. No questions were asked, no stipulations made, except as to the amount of the fee for the service, or the quantity of liquor to be drunk on the occasion. It not unfrequently happened, indeed, that the clergyman, the clerk, the bridegroom and the bride, were drunk at the very time the ceremony was performed. These disgraceful members of the sacred calling had their pliers, or barkers, who, if they caught sight of a man and woman walking together along the streets of the neighborhood, pestered them with solicitations as to whether they wanted a clergyman to marry them. Many of the early Fleet weddings were really performed at the chapel of the Fleet, but as the practice extended, it was found more convenient to have other places. Thereupon, many of the Fleet parsons and tavern keepers in the neighborhood fitted up a room in their respective lodgings or houses as a chapel. The parsons took the fees. The tavern keepers, besides sharing in the money paid, derived a profit from the sale of liquors which the wedding party drank. In some instances, the tavern keepers kept a parson on the establishment, at a weekly salary of 20 shillings. Most of the taverns near the Fleet kept their own registers in which the parsons entered the weddings. Some of these scandalous members of the highest of all professions were in the habit of hanging signs out of their windows with the words, "Weddings performed cheap here." One of the most notorious of these scandalous officials was a man of the name of George Keith, a Scotch minister, who, being in desperate circumstances, set up a marriage office in Mayfair, and subsequently in the Fleet, and carried on the same trade. This man's wedding business was so extensive and so scandalous, that the Bishop of London found it necessary to excommunicate him. It has been said of this person and his journeyman, that one morning, during the summer holidays, they united a greater number of couples than had been married at any 10 churches within memory. Keith lived till he was 89 years of age, and died in 1735. With such facilities for marriage, and such unprincipled ministers, it may easily be imagined that iniquitous schemes of all sorts were perpetrated under the name of Fleet weddings. The parsons were ready, for a bribe, to make false entries in their registers, to antedate weddings, to give fictitious certificates, and to marry persons who would declare only the initials of their names. They would also, for a consideration, obliterate any given entry. The sham bridegrooms, under different names, were married over and over again, with the full knowledge of the clerical practitioners. If, in other instances, a libertine desired to possess himself of any young and unsuspecting woman, who would not yield without being married, nothing was easier than to get the service performed at the Fleet without even the specification of names. Or if a parent found it necessary to legitimatize his natural children, a Fleet parson could be procured to give a marriage certificate at any required date. Similar transactions were carried on at the chapel in Mayfair, the Mint in the Borough, the Savoy, and other places about London, until the public scandal became so great, especially in consequence of the marriage at the Fleet of the Honourable Henry Fox with Georgiana Caroline, eldest daughter of the Duke of Richmond, that at length a marriage bill was passed. The law proclaimed that any person solemnizing matrimony in any other than a church or public chapel, without banns or license, on conviction, be adjudged guilty of felony, and be transported for 14 years. All such marriages are void. This act was to take effect on the 25th of March 1764. The passing of the Marriage Act put a stop to the marriages at Mayfair, but the day before the act came into operation 61 couples were married there.